with increased automation, more and more self-service is going to be happening between brands and customers. So when you get a chance, when a customer actually raises their hand and says, I opt human, the humans need to really do something more than just expedite calls.
You're listening to CX Passport, the show about creating great customer experiences with a dash of travel talk. Each episode, we'll talk with our guests about great CX, travel, and just like the best journeys, explore new directions we never anticipated. I'm your host, Rick Denton. I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Let's get going. Today's guest is a true leader in the realm of customer experience. I am excited to bring Dr. Joseph Michelli to CX Passport today. Joseph has been a key player in the industry for over 2 decades, currently serving as the CEO of the Michelli Experience, a full-service human experience delivery company. With a mission to, quote, serve those who have a passion to serve well, he's been a guiding force for leaders aiming to design and deliver loyalty-building human experiences. It's not often I have the opportunity to address a guest as doctor, an honor today's guest certainly achieved, having earned a PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Southern California. If you're an avid reader in the CX space, you might recognize his name. Joseph authored several New York Times best-selling books, including titles like Stronger Through Adversity, The Airbnb Way, and Driven to Delight, a story about delivering CX in the Mercedes way. He's also written books about Starbucks, Zappos, UCLA, and Ritz-Carlton. Quite the brand list and a wealth of customer experience stories to share. Something I didn't know before I dug a little bit deeper into Joseph's LinkedIn profile. Somebody puts my little high school radio internship and 1 semester college radio gig to shame with his over 30 years of radio experience. It'll be fun to hear those dulcet tones on today's show. Joseph, welcome to CX Passport.
Hey, Rick, I am so excited to be here. I love your show. Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate that. Thanks for the kind words to get us started off. It's got me all energized already. Let's start with those iconic brands. One of them, Airbnb. You know, as a platform, they've got a unique position because they sit between multiple parties. A customer could be both a traveler or the property owner, and sometimes they can actually be both. They're also the cities and communities with a significant interest in Airbnb. How does Airbnb listen to all those customers and balance what the parties say they need out of their customer experience?
Well, they brought in a great consultant. Chip Conley came in and really helped them focus on what they called enlightened hospitality or kind of elevated hospitality. And Chip, if you'll remember, wrote Drive, kind of how Maslow gets us our mojo in business. And I think what they tried to do is realize that they don't actually control anything other than a platform. And that platform enables them to bring together buyers and sellers. They have to kind of work within communities. There's a lot of pushback and resistance to short-term rentals within communities. Their goal was to influence to the greatest degree possible the way in which people felt belonging while traveling. So if you look at the logo of Airbnb, that kind of paperclip looking thing, it's actually called the Balo. And it in its own right is approachable by virtue of the fact that you should be able to create that Balo with your toe in the sand. I mean, it's really designed to say from the onset, everything is about belonging. People should be able to travel everywhere they want without prejudice. And so that's the underlying hospitality, what you want every single person to feel in the interaction and transactions associated with Airbnb. Obviously, they don't control that. There's pernicious behavior on the site. They try to manage it with technology. They use reveal rating systems between hosts and guests as ways to create greater transparency. But ultimately, it's an effort to say, well, we don't control the experience or the people who distribute it. We are responsible for setting what we want the Airbnb experience to be known for.
Yeah, so that you use the word control, and that's the one that actually was coming to mind when I was thinking about Airbnb. There's another example in that same space that I'd like to tease out a little bit as well. When these brands are, I guess, the customer, I can hear what you're saying. And still in my mind, I'm thinking, though, no, Airbnb is responsible for the roaches that were in the house or the bad pictures that were in the house or that sort of thing. Another brand is similar but slightly different approach to Mercedes, for example, and at least in the US, the experience is controlled through the dealership network, which is not Mercedes. You have your dealers that are part of Mercedes, but not the company itself. So in the Mercedes case, and even expand even further on the Airbnb, when the customer recognizes that brand as the responsible party for customer experience, how are they navigating that when the execution of that experience is done through other parties, like the homeowners or like the dealership network or through other elements?
Well, I think they're two very different examples, but they're very similar in some ways. So let me give you the difference. At Airbnb, what they control is access to the listing and or
Hmm.
your ability to book rooms. So they're going to control that by, if you get enough roach complaints in your property, you're going to be hard pressed to ever find you when people search for a property in your neighborhood, right? So they're going to
Yeah, right.
control it through the algorithms on search. The same is true with a guest who's unruly, untoward, is going to ban from the platform at the extremes, but certainly it's going to be more difficult for them for a host to accept their booking. On the Mercedes example, much more interesting in the sense that there's a lot of skin in the game for these dealers. They get all the
Yeah.
brand equity of Mercedes-Benz. There's limited regional territory. They're the dealer in that territory. So there's a lot more of a partnership between those two, but you're right, it's still all of an influence play. So in real quick terms, at Mercedes, we got a giant change in behavior at the dealership level when we negotiated with the dealer body and said, look, you get a certain amount of money, fixed revenue from every car sold, and you get a certain
Hmm.
percentage of revenue based on variable factors. We'd like for you to give up some of your fixed income and increase your variable factor. Now, that's a hard sell right off. And we
Whoa.
want that variable factor to be linked to customer experience. So you'd think initially they'd say no, but we then went in and said a little bit farther. By the way, in the old days, whenever we'd give you a variable, we would keep anything that you didn't earn, right? So we'd
Hmm.
hold it back. We went to them and said, no, not this time. We will give everything of that fixed back to those who meritoriously deliver an incredible customer experience. Now, this took buy-in at Daimler in Germany. It took buy-in at the dealer body. But interestingly enough, as soon as that got linked up, as soon as there was real skin in the game that said, look, I can actually make a whole bunch more money against the laggards among the dealer community if I really focus on customer experience. Suddenly, you saw everyone improving their customer experience in order to
Hmm.
capture that variable margin, which was at stake within the system. So there are ways to influence, and a lot of it links to profitability.
This is your captain speaking. I want to thank you for listening to CX Passport today. We've now reached our cruising altitude, so I'll turn that seatbelt sign off. While you're getting comfortable, hit that follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. Love it if you'd tell a friend about CX Passport, leave a review so others can discover the show as well. Now, sit back and enjoy the rest of the episode.
Yeah. So I often have talked about when I've been in customer experience influence, where either like before my consulting days when I was embedded inside of a company, or with clients today, it's a lot about incentives, capital I incentives, dollars, actual tangible, and then the lowercase I incentives, culture, celebration, those sorts of things. You're talking about the capital I. You're talking about
Yeah.
the hard dollar one. Now, this is
Well, let me just say
also
something really quickly. There's some great
yeah,
Forrester research that shows that people intend to do the right thing for customers. If you ask people, it's like, yes, my kids have a great sense of humor and they're incredibly attractive.
yeah.
The same is true with customer experience. We want to do the right thing. But oftentimes in organizations, the incentives work against us. Our bonuses are
Hmm.
driven not by delivering great customer experiences, but by churn and burn. So if you look at it from that vantage point, incentives, whether they're financial or cultural, are really where you have to work in the customer experience space. It's not just a feel good. People want to care about others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, let's talk about that for a second and it's not an example that we had in the Mercedes and the Airbnb, but where I see that a lot is in the contact center, that the incentives are tied to operational metrics that are frequently in direct opposition to the customer experience. And one of the classic ones is call handling time, like how long a call takes place. And yes, as a customer, I want the call to be done as quickly as possible. There's gaming to be had, though. If I'm an agent that realizes that this call may be taking a little bit longer, how can I just get it wrapped up? How can I get it moved on and not deliver that great customer experience? How have you helped companies balance that operational incentive? Because there's a reason that operational metrics exist with customer experience metrics and assigning incentives correctly. Let's just use that term, assigning incentives correctly between that blend.
Well, and I had the good fortune of working with the late Tony Hsieh, who was in charge of Zappos. And,
Yeah, right.
Zappos has really created a great contact center where they've changed the metrics around. What you're really looking for is, did we create a personal emotional connection? Did we resolve the problem within our policies? And then we go one step beyond. What are the metrics that we measure on the back end? We measure net promoter score, we measure resolution, and we measure whether or not somebody would be willing to steal you if they ran a customer service business. So on a 0 to 10 scale, how likely am I to want Rick to work with me if I were running a customer service business? Now, those are very different metrics. Return to call is a metric. So, I can't lag a lot between calls, but time in call, not so much, as long as resolution, personal emotional connection, and the output was something that the customer felt was right. I think it is understanding that this is one of those great moments in a relationship with a customer. With increased automation, more and more self-service is going to be happening between brands and customers. So when you get a chance, when a customer actually raises their hand and says, I opt human, the humans need to really do something more than just expedite calls. So I say that lovingly, knowing that there's less and less humans available to provide care. But when people do have to have a human solve a problem they can't solve with technology, that human had better be compassionate as well as knowledgeable.
Boy, you are like, I could just stop down on this because you are hitting my heart and where I really care the most. The episode has, I guess by the time yours comes out, it will have come out, with speaking with Rajiv Valoti at Spotify. And he talked about, we are absolutely trying to create as many self-serve options, as many digital solutions for the customer as possible. Yet when they do get to a human, we want it to be the most human experience, the most effective. We want it to be something that is what that human wants. And what I like that you're saying there is it's so many companies look at that as a failure. Oh gosh, they had to take it to a human. And I get the idea of trying to optimize. You're saying though, no, embrace the opportunity to seek that deeper connection. And a company like Zappos has demonstrated that classic, like so many of us in this world have heard that example and definitely embrace it. I'd like to see more and more companies embracing that and viewing that contact center, that human part of it, as actually an opportunity to gain great insights and build that ongoing loyalty as well.
There's so much in what you said, Rick, that I absolutely love too. I mean, one of the things I think of is how much money we spend trying to get customers to come to us. Like, please come to me. I'm going to be really good for you, right? And then they come to us, and whenever we have a human interaction, that's our chance to take and really live the commercial that we have sold them on, right? Like, this is your walking, talking commercial. When you walk into my store, when you interact with one of our people, that's where you get the true experience that we promised you in the brand messaging. And so I think sometimes you get it in the technology, but frequently the technology is just parity. I mean, everybody is trying to find the best self-service options, the minimizing any kind of human contact options. Everybody's trying to do that because customers don't want to have to reach out to a human.
Right.
But when they do get a human, that's the coolest part of our business, is helping those people understand their unique value proposition relative to artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Joseph, I'm going to ask you a question that is so incredibly open-ended that I'm not sure there is an answer, but that's why I like talking to folks like you. You may have the answer. Okay, you and I agree on this. We know it's right. And we know that it's going to create actual tangible business results, and the idea of increased revenue, increased loyalty, whatever. Why? Why are companies continuing to treat the human as perhaps the area that isn't focused, that is the area of cutting, whether it's the front line at a retail store or the contact center agent? That front line often is diminished as the lesser role when that's such a great opportunity. I'll just stop there. Why? Why are companies doing that?
The answer is C. Whenever I was in doubt in a multiple choice exam, I always chose C. So I'm going to choose C now.
Brilliant. Okay, good. Next question.
But in seriousness, I think what happens here is we understand humans cost a lot, and attracting talented humans is challenging, and developing human talent is challenging. It is easier to perfect algorithms with more data than it is to help people become more nuanced in the way they serve other human beings. The other thing is, I don't think we spend enough time understanding what do we want people to feel when they leave our business. So for me, I've created this concept called a way we serve statement, and every brand should identify what they want every customer to feel every single time, no excuses. And once you've done that, and so at Mercedes, that was delight, for example, that's the title of my book, Driven to Delight. Once you define that, then you can measure it. You can say to customers on a 0 to 10 scale, how delighted were you today with your service at Mercedes? And early on, those scores were pretty pathetic. But we aspired to teach people that they got raw material walking in the door, not like a manufacturing plant where you get uniform material and you impose a process on it and you get 0.0001 defects. No, we have raw material with such variability. We're going to impose some processes on it, but your nuanced service levels are going to be the difference between whether or not that person walks out delighted or not. And so, yes, we have to take the raw material, impose our processes, nuance it, and then we're still going to measure against outcome.
That's good. That's good, Joseph. I like that a lot. You can tell that the brain is steeping in that a bit. Let's go back to that Mercedes example for an example, and maybe let me not pick on Mercedes specifically because maybe they have solved for this. But the auto dealership industry is widely viewed as one of the worst offenders at what I'm about to bring up, and I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's the gamification of this. I'll use the term survey, but just soliciting that feedback from the customer. And it's the classic stories of, my kids won't get to eat tonight if you don't give me a 10. Don't turn in the survey if you don't have a 10. Talk to me first. Those kind of things. Because of the incentives we talked about earlier, it's easy to see how that then puts that pressure on that dealership employee. How are you helping companies still get that input from the customer, still focus on measuring it, still trying to drive success while extracting the gamification from it?
Yeah, well, first off, I don't think Mercedes has solved completely for it, nor has any car dealer. Unfortunately, the entire industry is still working against a benchmark. JD Power really matters. It's significant to the dealer community. A lot of incentives have been built around it. I think wrongly, anytime you link incentives to customer experience and view it as an outcome as opposed to a developmental opportunity, you're really missing out. But unfortunately, we do it all the time. What I think you can do, though, is give people some intel earlier on so they're not waiting for a lagging metric like Net Promoter Score as evidenced by JD Power. So you start giving them real-time data, ongoing flow of data instead of some retrospective look back from a customer. And you start to have them understand what it takes to behaviorally move the needle on the customer experience. That I think defocuses a smidge from it. But, Fred Reichelt, who created the Net Promoter Score, is a friend of mine, and he would tell you the biggest problem he's had with his metric is how people have taken it and made it into the be-all, end-all truth of whether or not you're delivering and then putting performance metrics around it. So I'm a big fan of saying, hey, this is telling us something. What do we need to learn? Not this is telling us something. How much can you earn?
Preach. Absolutely preach. So yes, again, hitting my heart with that. And I appreciate you commenting, hey, even Mercedes is still on that journey. I've experienced it in luxury brands. I've experienced it in economy brands. And so pushing that industry forward in the way you're describing.
The irony is, and we really need to tell this story, the more you try to do that with customers, the more they punish you. So this whole idea, the idea that it's somehow going to enhance your score is absolutely backfiring for brands. And there's research to that effect.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that there's scientific research because I can tell you unscientifically, this guy resents it so badly that sometimes, okay, if I like the person, maybe I'll just ignore the survey. But yeah, it definitely is going to knock it down in my eyes. Joseph, I want to tell you a totally different path because I'm always fascinated by people who have come to customer experience leadership, customer experience understanding, who didn't come up in a, quote, traditional CX path. I want to know about your radio experience because I'm assuming that it's better than my little Wednesday 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. college radio shift. How did you take that radio experience and then evolve into the CX leader you are today?
I think being on radio is just a form of communicating with people. It's a verbal format. It's just in the radio, the imagination. But I think for me, going from there to what I do today is a lot more about listening than it was about talking. And I think shifting that idea of not trying to be so interesting to captivate the listener while they're in their garage to stay around, as they're parking their car to stay for the next segment, but more now to be interested in people at an incredible level. That's how the shift happened for me. Is it's not about me and about entertaining people. It's more about understanding people and solving their problems.
Joseph, I love that shift. Now, at some point, I'd love to get deeper into what it was like to have 3 decades of radio experience and all that, but we don't have time in the show. However, even with the limited time we have, I do want to take a little break with you here, and I want to invite you into the First Class Lounge. We'll move quickly here and hopefully have a little bit of fun. What is a dream travel location from your past?
Spent a month in Tuscany. Unbelievable. Lots of wine, lots of food.
Tell me, okay, I said we'll move quickly, and yet when you say Tuscany and a month, I want to stop down because that actually fits my fantasy travel really strongly, where that's a place in the world that I'd want to just stop. What was it like to be there for a month?
Well, I speak a little Italian, so I would savor the experience, get up in the morning, hang out with a bunch of other Italian guys, standing up at an espresso bar, chit-chatting about things, the slow life, the slow eating, the slow cooking, the kind of just appreciating that I wasn't on my cell phone and wasn't doing any business. Really was one of the first times in a long time where I completely recreated and got the energy I needed to come back strong.
Oh man. Oh man, what an absolute fantasy, but it was reality for you. I think that may need to be a future reality for me. Speaking of future, what is a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
Well, in my youth, it was going to be to hike Machu Picchu, but given my advancing age, I doubt that's going to happen. I think I'm going to go with a little more savoring the Isles of Greece. How about that?
I like that. As my knees continue to age, a little too much cross country when I was younger. Yes, I can appreciate that as well. You mentioned slow eating. I imagine food's important to you because I know it's important to me. What is a favorite thing of yours to eat?
Oh, I eat everything, but I think lots of pasta just because I was raised on pasta. So it doesn't matter what kind of pasta, as long as it's got, lots of carbs.
Brilliant. Love that. Now, let's talk about that being raised era. What is something while you were growing up that you absolutely hated and were forced to eat as a kid?
I'm not quite sure why my parents thought liver and onions was an essential part, but they had not only was it bad and you had to eat it, but they had all these kind of healthy justifications on how it was going to, grow my brain. I think I fed so much of it to the dog that the dog must have been incredibly intelligent by the time it was all done.
You wonder why the family pet was that incredibly intelligent. Absolutely, I've heard liver and onions a couple times, and I too. It's not what I answer with that question, but my mom as well would put liver and onions in front. I don't know if it's a generational thing. I don't hear as much about it now, but my gosh, it just was not.
Yeah,
good.
We refused to do that to our children. We loved our children, unlike my parents. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Dad. Don't listen to this part of the episode. Joseph, what is one travel item, not including your phone, not including your passport, that you will not leave home without?
Well, I think your underwear is an important one to put in there probably, but my computer, I live on my computer. I could probably do without my phone almost compared to my computer because I just am working all the time while I'm on the road. I also carry headphones with me, earbuds with me, because hotel rooms can get really loud across the world. So I sometimes sleep with my iPad and my earbuds.
Joseph, I'm a big fan of. I don't put my earbuds in, but it is one of my items is earplugs. That goes with me wherever it's sitting in my travel kit. It's just an automatic grab that it goes. You never know which noisy road you're going to be next to, and a good sleep is so important to travel. I want to talk about your company because I liked that tagline that I saw, a full service human experience delivery company. That's the description I see for Michelli Experience on LinkedIn and elsewhere. Human experience. I know that's not an accidental word choice. Tell me what you mean by human experience and how do you work with companies to deliver that great human experience?
Yeah, I'm working on a new book about One Medical, which was purchased by Amazon last year for like $4 billion in the healthcare space. And they consider themselves human-centered and technology-powered. For me, it is about understanding that we are here to take care of human beings and not necessarily people labeled customers or people labeled employees or stakeholders or shareholders for that matter. To me, it is thinking about the universally human elements of us and leveraging our humanity to connect with other people.
How does that resonate? Because like in a branding perspective, it hits me. It's warm. And very few humans would say, "Oh, I don't want to focus on other humans." When you get into the kind of the nuts and bolts, though, are you finding that companies might find that too soft? How do you help them go from, no, this isn't just a tagline, it isn't just a soft thought, but actually, no, this is actually driving towards real, honest, gut to God, tangible results if you focus on human experience?
Just human beings are incredibly complex. We need all the technology we can to understand them. We need AI to look at preferences and patterns. And we need to look at sentiment through AI. We need to use all kinds of heavy duty technology to get into the inner workings of the human brain. Once we understand that, we can position our services, some of which are self-serve, but the ones that are not self-serve have to really connect to humanity. I would also suggest to you that, on the less human side of it, we can talk about personalization and making sure that I present to you the things that are relevant to you. On the more personal side, I can talk about all business is personal, and what matters most to you at the deepest parts of your life are the things that will connect you to a brand and make an experience memorable.
Again, you've caught me. The challenge of being a host of CX Passport is that a lot of times the guest will say something I just want to chew on. Like I just want to steep inside my brain. So that may have to be edited out while I'm just sitting here staring at you because it is so good.
I think the reality is, your show has covered all these topics. They're all inside of you. You're just kind enough to let us rant on about our own perspective on similar thinkings.
Well, I appreciate that. It is nice, Joseph, to be able to hear it and just have this opportunity to have a chat about it. And that's why I actually like asking questions where I want to take you next. And probably from a time perspective, I bet this closes out the episode. We'll see. There's so much more that I'd want to ask you. But that human experience, there's something else I noticed in your background that really caught my eye. And it's that part of human experience is mental wellness. And I know that we're doing a much better job of recognizing and acknowledging that this is a real issue now to be discussed, actually talked about, not hidden away and handled. I do, though, recognize we have a long ways to go. And I saw that you serve on the board of Bonfire Digital Wellness, which is, and I'm quoting here, a virtual gym for youth mental fitness. I've got a daughter that is so focused on, she's a freshman in university. She really wants to focus on youth mental fitness, especially in the competitive sports space. I'm really intrigued by this. What drew you to Bonfire and how are they addressing this growing challenge in youth mental wellness?
Well, there's a decrease in the number of school counselors available. It's hard to get mental health services through a psychologist these days or a social worker. So clearly there's a need to create opportunities. Kids are on their phones anyway. Can we leverage the digital platform as a way of doing good? So we know that kids are going to have a steady diet of digital streams and social media content. The question is, how do we help them become discerning consumers of that content and really be well in the way they use that content? On a broader level, we have a society of people who feel very alone. We have high anxiety and high depression in our culture. So I think figuring out, that many brands right now, there's a whole study out there that's kind of interesting. The number of contacts at contact centers from people who are just wanting to talk to somebody is going up.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it has nothing to do with the product array. They don't want self-serve. They want a human that they can actually have a few minutes with. So I think we as a society have to come to grips with how do we build community and connections in a world that's largely mediated by digital technology? And how do we make sure that people have opportunities to understand how to leverage technology for the good while also seeking out relationships in the human space?
That's going to be so vital. And I think those of us, Joseph, I think you and I are at least in a similar age category. You look a lot younger than me. So but
you obviously didn't research my background. I'm so old, older than dirt.
You and I, though, experienced, I would imagine our lives were part of that transitional generation where we know an era where it was drinking out of the faucet on the side of the house, that there was not a digital experience. And now we live in that world. Those that are native digital, sorry, I said that backwards, but digital natives have a completely different experience. And hearing what Bonfire Digital Wellness is doing to help, I like what you said, not resist it, but rather equip youth to be able to live in that environment is such an important part. And yeah, I'd actually heard that about that we're seeing more customer contact calls just simply for the human touch. There's a lot that oddly enough, customer experience, customer service can do to help
Yeah. And I will
overcome
just
some
end,
of
I
that.
would end by saying, we are what we eat, right? Like if we eat a lot of carbs and pasta, we become more looking like a piece of pasta. But the same is true with our digital content consumption, right? So figuring out how to help people make wise choices and
Yeah.
disciplined choices about how they engage across the digital platform is pretty important. And I think that's part of why I'm involved with digital wellness and the Bonfire community. So, but I am so honored to be a part of this digital experience, which felt incredibly humane.
Well, I appreciate that, Joseph, as well. And that, folks, as you've listened to Joseph, you probably are thinking, well, I'd like to get to know more about his approach to human experience or learn more from the brands that he's developed, the experiences and the stories from and the like. So, Joseph, if folks wanted to get to know a little bit more about you, a little bit more about the Michelli experience, about the books that you've written or the speeches that you give, where should they turn to learn more?
I am mercilessly all over the internet, so you can find me easily. Just put my name in, you'll find me. I'm at Joseph Michelli on LinkedIn, for example, and my website is josephmichelli.com.
Awesome. I will get all that into the show notes, and listeners, you can just scroll down there as always and just click the link. You don't have to hit pause. You don't have to get a pen, a pad, or pull out your phone. You can just click right there. Joseph, it's been exactly what I want out of an episode of CX Passport, and that is I don't exactly know where the journey is going to go. I may have put a map in place for us, but then we went wide ranging, and I appreciate that. Learning from Airbnb, from Mercedes, talking about Bonfire, digital wellness, and even hearing about your radio experience. All of that has informed me, and I know has informed the listeners. It has been a very enjoyable episode for sure. Joseph, thank you for being on CX Passport.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. If you like today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. Click subscribe on the CX Passport YouTube channel or your favorite podcast app. Next, leave a comment below the video or a review in your favorite podcast app so others can find and enjoy CX Passport too. Then head over to cxpassport.com for show notes and resources that can help you create tangible business results by delivering great customer experience. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.